In 1981, Steve Jobs flew to New York to meet with John Sculley, the then president of PepsiCo. Jobs, just 26 at the time, wanted Sculley to leave his secure corporate role and join Apple as CEO, a bold ask by any standard. During their initial meetings, Jobs, known for his passion and intensity, did what most people would do. He talked, he pitched, he persuaded. But Sculley wasn't convinced. Then something changed. On their final walk through Central Park, Jobs paused, not just physically, but mentally. He stopped selling and started listening. He asked Sculley what truly mattered to him, what kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. And then came the now famous question. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? Jobs didn't fill the space with features or forecasts. He created space. Space for reflection, space for meaning. That moment of listening, of reading the room, of understanding the man, not the resume, sealed the deal. Sculley joined Apple. The company's trajectory changed forever. You see, effective communication isn't about how well you talk. It's about how deeply you listen. Because when you listen better, you don't just hear words. You understand motives, build trust, and make people feel seen. And that, my friend, is where real influence begins. Let's begin. In a world full of noise, silence is a powerful currency. Most people rush to fill every second of conversation with words, as if pausing means they've lost control. But the great communicators know the truth. The pause is not a gap, it's a tool. It gives people space to reflect. It makes your words sink deeper. It invites honesty into the room. Pausing after a question or a point does something magical. It gives the other person room to speak their truth. People are more likely to reveal their genuine thoughts when they don't feel crowded by pressure or performance. Silence is a signal. You're safe to talk now. And when you create that space, you unlock the kind of communication that changes relationships, negotiations, and leadership. Warren Buffett once said, "The most important thing to do if you find yourself in a hole is to stop digging." That applies to communication too. A pause can prevent you from digging into defensiveness, oversharing, or making a weak point weaker. In one Harvard study on negotiation, people who embraced strategic silence closed better deals, not because they were aggressive, but because they listened longer and spoke less. Most people ask questions like they're skimming through a magazine, quick, casual, and surface level. But if you want to connect, influence, and lead, you need to ask questions that go deeper, not wider. These are the questions that open people up, not shut them down. Instead of, "What do you do?" try, "What made you choose that path?" Instead of, "How's business?" ask, "What's been the hardest lesson you've learned this year?" Deep questions build trust faster than any elevator pitch ever could. They show that you care about more than facts. You care about feelings, values, and experience. A striking example of this comes from Ed Catmull, co-founder of Pixar. In his book, Creativity Inc., Catmull explains how the company cultivated open communication not through formal reviews, but through deep, thoughtful questions asked in what they called brain trust meetings. Instead of telling directors what was wrong with a film, team members asked questions like, "What is the story you're really trying to tell here?" That one shift, from criticism to curiosity, helped produce films like Toy Story, Up, and Inside Out. Pixar's creative edge came not from louder voices, but from better questions. Words are only one part of the message. In fact, according to communication researcher Albert Mehrabian, only 7% of meaning comes from words. The rest? Tone, facial expressions, body language, This means that if you're not listening with your eyes, you're missing over 90% of the story. Great communicators aren't just tuned in to what's being said. They're tuned in to how it's being said. They read discomfort in the crossed arms. They sense uncertainty in a slight hesitation. They notice enthusiasm in the lift of someone's posture. Listening with your eyes means being fully present, not distracted, not looking at your phone, not rehearsing your response. One of the most remarkable examples of this comes from the world of emergency medicine. At the Cleveland Clinic, doctors are trained to observe patient behavior just as much as symptoms. In one instance, a nurse noticed a patient's increasing agitation, even though his vitals looked fine. Her attentive observations saved him from a silent cardiac event. In leadership, business, or marriage, the principle holds: pay attention to what's unspoken. It often reveals more than words ever could. One of the worst habits in communication is the Me Too reflex, that tendency to hijack someone else's story and make it about ourselves. A friend says they've been overwhelmed with work, and we respond, "Me too, I've been so swamped lately." It sounds empathetic on the surface, but underneath, it shifts the spotlight. Truly great listeners resist the urge to interrupt with their own version. They hold the space. They stay curious. They don't rush in to fix, advise, or compare. They recognize that sometimes people don't need your story. They just need your silence and presence. Oprah Winfrey once said the most common question people ask after a conversation is, "Did you hear me?" Not "Did you agree?" or "Did you fix it?" Just "Did you hear me?" That's the real currency of connection, not showing how similar you are, but showing how sincerely you've listened. In fact, research from Harvard University found that talking about ourselves triggers the same pleasure in the brain as food or money. Specifically, it activates the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center. That's why we're so tempted to jump in with our own story. But effective communication isn't about feeding your ego. It's about serving the moment. The best communicators are those who sacrifice the pleasure of being heard for the purpose of making others feel heard. And that's what Oprah was getting at. Most people don't walk away from a conversation hoping you impress them. They walk away hoping you understood them. That's what they remember. That's what they trust. One of the easiest ways to destroy communication is to correct someone before you understand them. We often rush to challenge an idea, offer a counterpoint, or share our opinion before we've even paused to understand what the other person is saying. But understanding isn't agreement, it's acknowledgement. When you validate, you say, "I hear you. That makes sense based on your experience." It doesn't mean you endorse the idea, just that you respect the person behind it. And here's the magic. Once someone feels validated, they become more open to hearing your perspective. Challenge lands better after acknowledgement. A powerful case of this comes from FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss, who wrote in Never Split the Difference that the key to persuasion is tactical empathy. Before making demands, Voss always echoed and validated the other person's viewpoint, even if it was completely opposite of his own. Why? Because validation lowers defenses. It builds a bridge. And once the bridge is built, you can carry truth across it. In 2008, just after Barack Obama won the US presidency, a journalist asked David Axelrod, his chief strategist, what made Obama such a powerful communicator? Axelrod didn't mention his speeches or stage presence. Instead, he said, Barack listens. He listens so well that people feel like they're the only person in the room. That's what leadership sounds like. Not thunder, but presence. You see, effective communication isn't about dominating the conversation. It's about honoring it, It's not how much you say, but how much you receive. Anyone can talk louder. The wise learn to listen deeper, because talkers may command attention. But listeners, they earn respect. They build trust. They open doors. And in the end, it's the quietest skill, listening, that builds the strongest connections, the best teams, and yes, sometimes even presidencies. Start there.